to appear. So now in March I believed that there was possibly a virus. I was one of these people that I went along within the first 3 weeks of lockdown. I went along with it, but 3 weeks into it, something wasn't sitting right for me. And it got me sort of looking into and questioning my gut feeling. What started doing it for you that made you question that something wasn't right here?
I think, excuse me, primarily because I've just had a crusty roll. It's gone down the wrong hole. So for me, it was more, we were being told one thing and another thing was actually happening. You know, the death rate just wasn't there. There was no increased death rate. I was contacted very early on by the BBC, who asked to come and do an interview to promote the hysteria and the narrative. The BBC came, they briefed me heavily for about half an hour, got me to dress up in full PPE, and basically it was a well-scripted interview promoting their hysteria. And I'd hasten to add that at the time, I kind of totally believed there was a COVID, you know, as an undertaker. If you go to the hospital and somebody produces a deceased inside a body bag and they say, this deceased has TB or HIV or something else very nasty, you listen, you know, in the same way you wouldn't walk across the road with your eyes closed, would you?
Yeah.
But you know, the BBC came out, got their interview, and I kind of didn't think any more of it. And then over the months, it's about ticking boxes, isn't it, and joining dots. And I just found that one thing after another wasn't adding up. The death rate was one. Then I had a pandemic guy that was ringing me every Monday. He introduced himself as a government-sponsored pandemic guy, and he said to me, I'm going to be calling you every Monday. He said, and I'm going to ask you several questions. One, what is your capacity? Number two, how many deceased have you had in this week? Number three, how many are COVID? And number four, where from? So I was giving him this info, happy to help, you know. And it became apparent pretty quickly that I felt that he was steering me. And by steering me, I kind of mean the conversation would go, I would kind of say I picked a guy up from a hospice who was a cancer sufferer. And then I picked up an old boy from a care home who was in his 90s who had dementia. Neither were COVID, neither had a doctor in attendance, neither had a police officer in attendance. There was no COVID test there. There was no ventilator or anything like that there. They weren't COVID. And he would say, well, there was COVID in that care home though, because I was told. And there was COVID in the hospice. We know because we spoke to other people. So they were all put down as COVID deaths, even one guy that was run over. So that kind of, was blatant. And I kind of, I got to know this guy well. It's amazing how quickly you can get to know someone, even with, a 2-minute chat every Monday. And he eventually admitted to me he didn't know why he was doing the job because there were no COVID tests. So that's coming from the man who's ringing all the funeral directors. You know, he kind of confided that in me. Yeah. So it wasn't just me and what I was saying. It was what everyone was saying. There were no COVID tests. The death rate wasn't up. And then on top of that, at the time, obviously, during the pandemic, other funeral directors were taking coffins to the hospital and putting people directly in them and sealing those coffins there and then. They weren't washing and dressing. And you have to remember, these are people that have lost their loved one, perhaps via a Zoom call or perhaps standing there in a hazmat suit. I couldn't bring myself to do that, you know, so I've washed and dressed them all. And there was one particular family, a beautiful West Indian family, come and see me, and they'd lost a little girl of 6 and she died from cancer. Totally unrelated to COVID, expected deaths, very, very sad and very rare. And they wanted to see their little girl. You know, how can I tell them I can't? You know, could you stand there and tell someone they can't see their 6-year-old girl?
No, it's heartbreaking.
I wouldn't do it. I washed her and dressed her, and then I kind of stood back and thought, well, if I can do that for them, I can do it for everyone. I'll wait and see if I fall over. And you know, I'm 53, I'm asthmatic. I've dressed perhaps 100 deceased, COVID deceased. I've pulled them out of body bags, swimming in fluid, and I've picked them up whilst they're still warm. So it's a miracle I'm alive, surely.
Well, you would be.
Yeah, I'm a miracle of modern science. Helped me constantly. My embalmer is 55. He's a heart attack survivor. He had a heart attack 10 years ago. He was a heavy lad back then, you know. He's turned his life around, but you know, he's on the most vulnerable list. And again, he hasn't had a day off. None of us have had a day off. And this whole time we've been looking after him. We've not worn masks because we refused to do so. And we feel that after much consideration, the risks outweigh the benefits. You know, it's not going to stop a virus if there is a virus. And to be honest with you, I doubt very much there is a virus. I don't think there was a Wuhan lab or any of it now. I kind of think it's smoke and mirrors and sleight of hand to convince people to go and have an injection.
There's a lot of backhanders going on.
Yeah, exactly. So 2020 carried on in much the same way. And then Can
I ask you, did you find that there were more deaths in a particular area?
That's just what I was coming to. So death rate was really low. It was actually quieter than 2019, to be honest with you. 2019 was a busier year than 2020, even despite the great effort made in care homes to kill people off. So the care home debacle came. They were too keen to announce, there's going to be deaths in care homes. We've got to protect the most vulnerable. We're working on a vaccine, but people in care homes will die. And the moment they said that, I kind of took a step back and I thought, now that rings alarm bells for me, because there's no way in the world a virus targets a building. You know, it targets us all, or it doesn't target us all. April and March came, and we were suddenly getting phone calls exclusively for care homes. Nowhere else, no hospital calls. It went through the roof. And as a funeral director, I probably do 160, 170 funerals a year. We're a very small player, and we were called out to care homes every night for just under 3 weeks, every night. So I can only imagine how the big players, they must have lived in care homes. This was at exactly the same time Hancock had issued orders to transfer all the elderly patients into care homes, and he labelled them as COVID patients to die a good death. Now, I've since liaised, I've had, obviously, because I've gone public, I've had a great number of people, professors, virologists, doctors, nurses of 20, 30 years. Hundreds and hundreds of people have been maimed and killed, lost loved ones from these injections. And one of the guys that reached out to me is a really lovely guy called Mark. And he's sent out hundreds of FOIs, Freedom of Information Acts, and he's asked for the purchase history of midazolam. Now, for those of your viewers who don't know, midazolam is a sedative. It's a brand name, so it may be known by other names in other places, but it's primarily used here in care homes. Dementia or Alzheimer's, you might physically be very fit, and your listeners will know this if they've got a loved one that's perhaps very physically very fit, but they've lost their mind. So they go into care homes, and gone are the days where we tie them to beds physically. They do this chemically now, and one of the they use quite often is midazolam. Now, there's a certain amount of care homes, there's a certain amount of residents in those care homes, and there's a pattern to the amount of midazolam that's used, logistically, you know. Now, in March and April of 2020, when I was attending this care home, suddenly, every day for 3 weeks, there's up to 1,000% increase in the procurement of this midazolam, and there's a paper trail to follow that. Now, Hancock was very aware of that, and he made great things to kind of explain, it's to intubate patients. It wasn't at all. It made its way into care homes. I know it did because I saw the odd empty file of it here and there on bedside cabinet or in a bedside bin, you know, because I was looking, because by then I kind of suspected it isn't right. And, you know, I never once saw a doctor in attendance. I never once saw a policeman in attendance. I never once saw a COVID test, but all these patients were labelled COVID, and they weren't COVID. I know they weren't. I spoke to the families, you know. So I suspect.
I remember reading about this care home. It was actually a friend of a friend who was sharing their experience, and she got told that everyone in the care home had to have all their tablets removed and kneel by mouth. And it was shocking, and she couldn't believe they were doing this. And basically, if they could not survive without the medication, which most of them needed the medication to survive,
described it, heart tablets and stuff like that. And Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm totally surprised. So I kind of, and I'd hasten to add, it's so unusual. As a small player, like I say, we do, I don't know, 160, 170 funerals a year. But as a bigger player, when I worked for the co-op, they had like 60% market share. So when you were on call, you were really busy. You know, we used to do 15, sometimes 20 removals a week when you were on call on nights. Most people tend to pass away in the early hours because that's when they're most tired. Now, it's so unusual. We're very good as a society to get people to pass away in hospital. And what I mean by that is, say, for example, I had 10 people in my care. 8 of them I would have collected from hospital. One would have been collected from a care home, and one perhaps either from a residential address or a hospice, you know, where they've gone to pass away. That's the normal ratio. That's just how it works statistically. There's no way on earth in the nearly 10 years I worked for the co-op, I don't ever remember doing 3 consecutive nights to care homes. And yet here in March and April, as a small private undertaker, I was called out every night for 3 weeks. Exclusively at a time when they bought 1,000% more midazolam in. And Matt Hancock has openly said in Parliament, we sent them there for a good death.
It's just disgusting, isn't it?
There's a GP, Harold Shipman. He died in a prison cell for exactly the same thing. With 200 patients, he was over the average, and that was what the cremation paperwork was brought in for. And we talked about that just before we went on air. We've got a government here who has legislated to kill thousands and thousands and thousands up and down the country, people that didn't have COVID, people that weren't terminally ill.
Have you guys, please share this live. That's all I ask. We've got, you know, a great person speaking here. Let's reach out as much as we can. Have you had many children, say, you know, to the age of 18, logged down as COVID?
There hasn't been any child deaths at all from COVID at all in my area. I would know. It would be big news, you know, because that would then be a really sad event. I mean, I've had children that have been in my care from other factors. Thankfully, it's a very rare thing. But if there had been a child died within 50 miles of me, I would know about it if it was a COVID death.
So in this whole year, since November 2019...
Not a single child, no.
Not a single child, because now they're coming for the children and they want to jab the children.
I would suggest to you, this is a coal, it's depopulation. There are 2 main fronts that you would tackle to depopulate. One of them would be to sterilise and kill children, and the other would be to kill the adults, the population. That they know the future is our children, so they come for the children now. And I can tell you what will happen. I'll make an unnerving prediction. They've already started vaccinating children, and the parents are taking them that believe this lie. And they are victims of crime, I will tell you. I don't resent them. I think they're going to need us as the time goes on, because their children are going to get sick, and some of those children will die. And they'll call a new variant, and they'll have careful parents, and they'll have actors parading as parents, crisis actors, which we all know well they've done numerous times, and they'll urge us to protect the children and have a jab. I know it's coming. I can tell you now, with almost scientific-like foresight, the children will die not long after they begin jabbing en masse. They'll say it's a new variant. They'll urge us to protect the children.
I think Dr. Zelenko was saying that there's not enough letters in the alphabet to name all the new variants that they have for this virus.
It's called
a pandemic of variants.
So when they say there's yet another variant, it's well known within the NHS, for example, that the Delta variant is widely regarded as vaccine injury. Now, if I have a paramedic attend a scene, what they do is they ask triage questions. So say, for example, we get someone collapse in the street and a paramedic would attend. Part of the triage questioning is to ascertain and triage that patient. They ask, was this patient a vaccine recipient? As part of their triage questioning. I know, because I've spoke to the families who have told me. And I've spoke to paramedics who have told me, because it helps them quickly assess the situation, you know, and they are triaging vaccine recipients. I've spoke to a 111 worker, 2 now, who have called me, who have told me, one said 70% and one said 75% of the calls are people who have been vaccinated, reporting adverse effects and struggling to breathe.
Yeah, yeah. That was in the government website as well, saying that 60 to 70% of the deaths coming this winter will be the double jabbed.
Yeah,
And I think,
of course it will. Now they're preparing you for something they actually know is already going to happen, because that's what they're trying to do. You know,
yeah,
the truth is best hidden right in front of you, isn't it?
in front of you. There was I think it was Dr. Zelenko again. So there's a new variant for children.
That was same thing, and all being totally ignored, aren't they?
Yeah, and that was logged in November 2020, registered in the FDA, and it's called multi-system inflammatory syndrome, and that's a side effect from the jab.
Yes.
And that was logged.
There are 4 causes of death that I am seeing consistently in people too young to die: stroke, heart attack, blood clot, multiple organ failure.
Yeah, yeah.
Those 4 specifically, time after time, and they're all undiscovered heart conditions. Because I would suggest that when the coroner takes a look, and I don't doubt my local coroner is a man of integrity, he sees a heart condition. Do you know? And I asked the family, some of them are aware of what's gone on and they're very angry and they're dropped like a shitty stick and ignored, and others are totally oblivious. You know, I'll kind of ask all of the families in my care, has your loved one had a jab? Just under the guise of me being kind of knowing, so that I can be safe washing and dressing them. And some of them are aware. Some of them are totally oblivious, and they're saying, yeah, mum was double jabbed, but it can't be that because it was 4 months ago. You know, they're totally oblivious, and I'm not about to sit there and call them a liar or call them gullible. I'm there to look after their mum. So it's certainly there are questions that should have been asked. There are plenty of people far more eloquent than me that I've asking questions, and they're being totally ignored. Now, there are 2 pivotal things that are about to happen that I suggest will be make or break for mankind as we know it. One of them is going to be the death of children. As I've said, they'll inject children, that they're coercing them to not even ask their parents and to get consent. 12-year-olds, you know, they're not old enough to get married, they're not old enough to drink, they can't have children, they can't vote, but they can make a life decision or death decision on a jab, an experimental gene therapy. Unforgivable, absolutely unforgivable. And the fact that the government would coerce them and put the responsibility into schools, lining up the schools for a bloodbath, I can tell you, because meeting the parents of a dead or maimed child over a coffee morning isn't going to cut it. It isn't going to cut it.
The sad thing is, I work in a school.
Then you'll know exactly what I've said is true.
The problem is, I'm in a primary school, and they're targeting the secondary children at the moment, and it won't be long before they come for the primary children anyway.
Of course.
But what's sad, over 2 schools, I am the only person that has not been jabbed. The majority of people really believe this is going to protect them.
They will, because they haven't been in my position to see. And going on to what I was saying, the second real key event will be the NHS. Now, the NHS are in the same chain that I'm in. They see firsthand what these injections, they're not vaccines, they're injections. They see what they're doing, and they're now coercing and bullying, and they've held the carrot, they're now going to bring out the stick. I can tell you now, they're already announcing they're going to have 50,000 shortage of doctors. That's not because of the numbers of increasing dead. I can tell you that's because these people know what these injections do, and they will not take them. So they will be forced out of the NHS. And then in turn, the threats and the coercion and the threats of their job, which they've worked really hard to get, will no longer bear weight. And I suspect that many of these people will speak out, because the loss of their job is no longer a threat if they've been pushed.
Yeah, they're going off in the loop now.
The death of children and the testimony of NHS workers. This is who we're relying on now to sway opinion, to see the truth for what it is. And I would hasten to add, I've had around 40 funeral care professionals reach out to me, some of them from the co-op. All too frightened to talk. And interestingly, with the co-op, we went back to the debt that they'd incurred It was very cleverly done. So the way it works with the Co-op Bank, they were offered a load of very cheap toxic debt, and they took that debt on as a bank, and they doubled their money. They did really well on it. So they were then offered another load, and again they did really well on it. And this went on for about 6 times, and each time the amount increased until they went shit or bust. And the very last one they got stung on. It was really, they were cleverly set up for the tune of £500 million. Now, £500 million, they couldn't even manage the interest payments on that. So imagine the kind of leverage that now has on this industry player that is 60% market share and dealing with the dead. That's going to buy compliance, that's going to buy silence, and they won't speak out. The only way you're going to get the truth is from small independents. And I'm finding consistently they've got no one to answer to, you know.
Yeah.
But they will make it increasingly difficult for us to operate because we are witnesses. Do you know? There's no legislation on funeral directors. They've just started legislating now to push us out.
What's the legislation sort of saying?
People jump through ridiculous hoops. Like all of a sudden, I'm being asked for asbestos reports, electrical safety certificates. You know, every legitimate angle that they feel they can prod at to see who's going to fall over. I have to have price lists. I now, as a funeral director, I can tell you, I set up on my own because I deeply care about people, and this is why I put my arse on the line, because I deeply care about people. And I've always, the people that come to see me are bereft and they're broken and they've lost the people that they love most in their life. So I owe it to them to take care of them and not exploit them. Now, you'll have seen my Google profile. You'll see what people have written about me, and you'll see the testimony of those people that I have no influence over. In fact, I do have influence because it's how I treat them determines what they think about me. One of the key things for me, and I've been pushing for a long time, is funeral directors to put price listing on their website. They're suddenly forcing that on everyone now, even the small players. I think personally that's a good thing, but it illustrates the efforts that they're making at time of pandemic to squeeze independence. Now, the big people that have a lot of resources are going to mop these bits up. They've got people that they can assign to these new criteria to get it done. The small people like myself, it's going to be more of a challenge to keep jumping through these hoops. And the suggestion is that they want us out of the way because we're all witnesses, aren't we? You know? And
you're a small business and you're a threat to the establishment.
Yeah, of course we are. I know what's gone on. I'm in no doubt whatsoever. No doubt whatsoever. Last year I did a funeral for a senior healthcare professional who lost his partner, and I got very close very quickly, and he told me they're very, very, very dangerous and not to touch these jabs. The story I was given, and he was probably told half the story. The government were pressuring the pharmaceutical companies. The pharmaceutical companies could write any conditions they want, and the government would have written and accepted it. And they said, we haven't got anything that's safe. In fact, the rumor was they were going through 200 rhesus monkeys a week.
Oh, my goodness.
They were dying. They were dying because it wasn't safe. It was damaging them and killing them. So they kind of told the government outright, we would want a waiver for any and all adverse effects and deaths. And the government in turn panicked, and it consulted its plethora of expertise, which is NHS consultants, this guy being one of them. And he, along with all his colleagues, said the same thing. It isn't safe, don't do it. And they still went and did it. And now they're targeting children.
They are targeting. The problem I find is we can all try, and we have, and we've been out there ourselves, trying to scream and shout and warn people, but ultimately most of these people a year and a half down the line, if they're not waking up now, they're never going to wake up. They're never going to know the truth.
My hope,
and these children
is the death of children may well be that wake-up call they need, because I would suggest somebody, we're all very different people, but we all have one thing in common: we really love our children. So you take your child to have a vaccine because you believe there's an imminent threat, and your government has coerced you into that. I've got total respect for you because you genuinely believe you're helping save your child. If your child is sick and dies, you're honest with yourself. You know that you've taken that child for that injection, and ultimately you've led them to their death. Will you stay silent and follow the government narrative then? Or then will you see the connection and will you speak out? And I would suggest to you that when these plethora of kids die, parents will know the truth in their hearts, and it's up to them to speak out to save other people's children. Because otherwise we're going to see rivers of blood across the country, in the same way as we're seeing in Australia, Canada, Ireland and France. And God knows if that's what we're seeing, what's creeping through. And I've seen the footage. It's truly horrific. It's like a draconian 1984 horror film. You know, you wouldn't believe that one human could do this to another human, but they are.
Isn't it? It's so satanic.
Beating women, and you know, it is coming here. And for all these people that are maybe standing back, and for the people that have spoken to me, who I can't betray their confidence, if they want to speak out, that's up to them to do that. But I would want to go down on record as the guy that was actually honest and spoke out in the hope that I could leave a legacy of saving someone somewhere and perhaps leading a crusade to stop this madness. Because unless we go to the top and cut the head off the snake, these people will kill us all. I've got no doubt in my mind, because I'm seeing it on a daily basis firsthand. And if I am collateral damage in that fight, so be it. Because if I don't say anything, I'm doomed anyway. And if I do say something, I'm doomed. So, you know, you've got to look at this objectively for what it is. And I would urge every medical professional and every funeral care professional on the coalface to just be honest, you know, and because they will come for you and they will come for your children as well. You know, God forbid, you know the truth. Why haven't you all fell over dealing with all these COVID deceased? Because you know the answer. You know, you need to speak out now and you need to be brave.
We were talking to friends of ours, and they have children, and one of their children has a heart condition, and so the mother's worries that she wants all the children to get vaccinated to protect the younger one who's got a heart condition.
It's called being coerced.
And that, you know,
I can tell you, if a child with a heart condition has this vaccine, there's a fair chance they will die.
Yeah. Well, this is it, and we try to explain to her, and hopefully, I'm going to send her this this link when we finish.
And by all means, you know what, ask her to call me personally. You've got my details. You can give her my details. Tell her to call me personally. I'm even happy if she's local to sit and have a chat with her. Honestly, just to give her the informed consent these people are denying her. Yeah. Well, this is what the problem is. This is why a lot of us are taking to the streets and talking to people, because they're not getting the full information, the full, you know, disclosure. That's the thing. I mean, they're talking now about in the future possibly mandating. They're building huge prison camps everywhere. And I would suggest to you, for example, guys, have a look at HMP Wellingborough and up at Harvard. They're building super prisons. 20 and 30,000 each to hold. Now, we've been talking as a society about the overcrowding in prisons for decades. And I would agree, yes, they're overcrowded. Let's face it, there are a lot of horrible people that need to go in them, aren't there? Why would they pick a time like now when the economy is on it?
Politicians.
Yeah, to build these huge... Do you know that in the 18 months that this has been going on, there are 600 new billionaires in the UK, 600 new billionaires on the back of your misery and your ruin. Exactly. Yeah. Follow the money. Tell you, you know, it's kind of, but collectively we have the power. So I would suggest to you, as consumers, we hold the power. So forget the supermarkets. Go and support your local greengrocer. Do you know? Yeah. And all men that they're jumping on. Go and support your farmer's shop and places like that. And take back that power. Don't consent. When they bring out the vaccine passports, ignore them. I don't even acknowledge the email. I've had my email telling me to register. They can get fucked. I would never, ever support this Nazi tyranny. What's next? Do we start walking around with the yellow Star of David? Yeah. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And it's ridiculous to think it's reasonable to accept it. I refuse to accept it. And I'm on the coalface dealing with these people.
The vaccine passes in Germany actually have got the Star of David on them.
There you go. There you go. So
it's so in your face.
Yeah, of course it is. They can laugh at you. They could
Yes,
laugh.
it's just pure mockery, isn't it?
So in 2017, I remember 2017, there was the worst flu pandemic that we had. And I think Australia had the worst flu in 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was more deaths that year, 2017, 2018, from the natural flu, if it's natural.
If it's natural. Let me tell you how many flu deaths we had last year.
None.
None.
Well, that's what I say. COVID killed the seasonal flu, didn't it?
Yeah,
Big round of applause for COVID.
We had a dear friend of ours who died in hospital, and we done everything we could to fight his corner. He went in with COPD.
Yeah.
He did not take the test. They then told us he took the PCR test, he had COVID, and he was being treated for COVID. We fought as hard as we could.
Yeah.
And we lost. They killed him. Within less than a week, they killed him. And they put him down as a COVID death.
I've had
Can I just add to that as well, John? I was there during the end of life. I categorically refused to put on the PPE under the understanding. I said, but you give me the logic in me wearing a face shield in an aircon building in a COVID room, what the face shield would do. I said, if you can give me a valid reason why I should wear it, I'll put it on. But I know you can't. So I'm going in there. And I was in there 3 hours holding his hand, rubbing his hair while he's breathing with
other patients.
Yes, exactly. There was 2 other COVID patients in the ward. So I was at end of life. They're pumping full of Christ knows what. You probably know more than I do. He was breathing the whole time in my face without oxygen on. And I never got a snotty nose.
Nothing.
Nothing. Funny that, isn't it?
Perhaps you'll appreciate, I mean, early on in the game, I did believe the COVID thing, and I was really worried. And I was washing and dressing all these people, waiting. Every morning I was waking up thinking, no, still all right, you know, and it went like that on for months, and it's continued to do so. And they've streamlined the process now so quickly. I mean, a lot of these people, I was picking them up warm and embalming them warm and washing them warm. And what
I was saying, John, we are the living proof.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't just me, it was my wife and my embalmer, who's a heart attack survivor, and every other undertaker I've spoken to personally. Some of them, don't get me wrong, do believe it, and others, I suspect, probably take advantage of it. I mean, when you think about it logically, if I am instructed by a family to look after a loved one, if they want to spend time with that loved one, it's a case of embalming them or washing and dressing them, presenting them, and spending time with the family, counselling the family when they come in. If I haven't got to do that and I can just sip a coffee, you know, put a coffin lid on and seal it and call it, oh, it's because of COVID, it's very easy for me as an undertaker, isn't it, to do that?
Money.
So, well, they're not charging half the money for half the service. They still charge the full whack.
Yeah, easy money for you.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's why, like I say, I refuse to do it. I care too much to treat people like that, and I'll continue washing and dressing them and treating them the way I would want my family treated until they silence me or I die suddenly from a heart attack or I'm suicided. And I would have them in good health and happy-go-lucky. You know, so if I suddenly,
you would be at the at-risk age as well, wouldn't you?
Oh, they've harassed me. Yeah, go and have one. Go and have a jab. You're at high risk of being seriously ill and dying. And, you know, well, do you know what? I've done pretty well up to now.
You know, like we were saying, the strange thing is that this pandemic, yet on the 19th of March last year, they downgraded the severity of the virus as no longer a highly infectious disease. But yet they were still telling undertakers
autopsies or post-mortems, you know, because I understand if there's a different kind of category of it, it means they did go through a period, I know locally, that where they weren't doing post-mortems. My understanding was if somebody tested positive and was seen as a COVID death, there was the outcome. Do you know? So and also there's the inherent risk that was portrayed to anyone that's cutting into a deceased that has COVID, you know. So it was streamlined, extremely quick, so that I could, you know, the whole turnaround process was really, really quick. It used to be a case of when somebody passed away, a doctor had to attend. If he had concerns, he would then call a police officer. Sometimes the police would turn up anyway because, you know, they love it. It's an easy number for them just to sit about for a couple of hours, you know, exchanging pleasantries with a nurse or whatever. I've seen them there, you know, and then they would call me once he declared death or certified death in the case of a doctor. But interestingly, I had a letter from the Thames Valley Commissioner in March of 2018 saying that as a funeral director, we want to advise you, you will not be seeing a doctor on scene. You will not be seeing a police officer on scene. So you need to declare death as a funeral director And if you have any concerns, then to raise those concerns to us. And I wrote him a right snotty email back and said, look, I'm not qualified to declare death, and I'm not doing your job. You know, if I go somewhere and there's a little bit of blood on the pillow, am I going to start saying to this family, I'm not happy, I'm going to ring the police? You know, don't be stupid. Why would they even suggest that that is acceptable? It isn't acceptable, and I refuse to carry them and do their job for them. But
that's right.
Was standing on doorsteps clapping for the NHS at the time, weren't they? They ain't clapping now, are they?
Well, people still believe the NHS are, you know, doing their best, and people still believe Boris is doing his best.
I've spoken to nurses personally. One of them came and
saw
saw
me. Their best, don't they? Just not for the reason what we believe.
Who have been instructed by management in hospitals. They've been called into a room and instructed to deliver fatal doses of midazolam, 60 milligrams. But
this is on the nurse's head. They can actually get done for this.
Well, the interesting thing is, you know, the hypocritical, I call it the hypocritical oath. The hypocritical oath was revised in 2011 and now omits the wording, I will do no harm. That's not now in the Hippocratic Oath. That was revised in 2011. So a doctor can fully follow the Hippocratic Oath and still euthanize someone.
Because the words "I will do no harm" have been removed.
Yeah. Yeah. And if anyone doesn't believe me, just Google the Hippocratic Oath. They'll see the old version, and they'll see the revised version was indeed in 2011.
And this is why knowledge is power right now, because we all need to be aware of things like this.
100%, yeah, and this is why I take the time to talk to anyone. And I'd hasten to add, I've not come out and said this from day one. In fact, you know, for the first 2 or 3 months, I fully believed it, and I was very frightened. But I can tell you now, I'm very much more frightened of my own government than I am of COVID.
Yeah,
yes, right.
Yeah, exactly.
I see what is going on. I know what's going on, and I don't doubt at some point they'll either silence me or I'll die from a sudden heart failure. If I do, I'll leave a legacy the same as everyone else that's passed away. And I want my legacy to be truth and honesty and decency, something that Westminster's lacked for many decades now, sadly.
So I'm just wondering if anyone's got any questions, please drop them here now so we can ask John.
Feel free to ask.
I mean, we are living in a massive medical fraud. It literally is, you know, and when like you say, you're an independent funeral director.
I would hasten to add, I've emailed my MP, which is Ian Stewart. He's a Tory, and I've emailed Boris Johnson, neither of who have responded or even acknowledged my email. And there are some very, very, very serious allegations I've made in those emails, and they don't seem fit to respond. But I would hasten to add, there are thousands of doctors, thousands of nurses, thousands of consultants that have all said the same thing. They're ignoring us all and just ploughing on, and now they're targeting children, aren't they?
The problem is, they just the plan is full speed ahead, and it doesn't matter.
So they're going to plough on now, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, there are clearly different batches of vaccines. They're not vaccines, different batches of injection. I've heard of a wide range of injuries. So one guy passed away in the car on the way home. Another guy was paralyzed from the waist down. So he was then seen as vulnerable, and they gave him a second jab, and he was found passed away the following day. Another guy was passed away a couple of hours after. It's a never-ending list of 1 in a millions at this funeral home, and people that I've spoken to directly. It's so obvious. I don't know what else I can say. You know,
this is the thing, John. I used to regularly give blood many years ago.
Yeah.
And after I give blood, or this was just the common procedure, you give your blood. They sit you down for a half hour. You get a free biscuit, cup of tea, and a sandwich. Yeah. But they keep you there. I mean, don't get me wrong. You're not handcuffed to the chair. You can leave if you want. But you know, they'd like to see that you're okay before that you leave the donor centre. And yet they're administering these toxic poisons, because let's call it, they're not a vaccine. And like I say, many people do get in their car and drive. Yeah. Now, if they do have, adverse side effects and that, and they're on the motorway and they're doing 70 miles an hour, God forbid.
It lends itself to the coal, though, doesn't it? You know, and I would hasten to, last weekend on Saturday, I received an email from a Russian-based media company offering me 85,000 for exclusive rights to my story. The 85,000 was on condition that I would never speak to anyone else. And I've turned that down. I responded to that email after chewing it over to consider my response. And I CC'd in about 24 people out of my inbox. So it's quite obvious to me that a story of this magnitude is probably the biggest story in modern history. And I would suggest that it pales into insignificance events like the Holocaust and stuff like that, because there are far more than 6 million recipients now globally. There are many, many more millions. And I suspect probably approaching the billions mark. So it's clear to me that many of these will be dead within the next 3 to 5 years. An expert testimony has confirmed that, you know, so that's not just my opinion. These are medical experts. So a terrible crime against humanity has been done. And their concern is to silence me, to tie me to them so that I'm not allowed to speak any more about it. You know, you have to ask yourself why a random Russian-backed media company wants to offer me 85 grand.
Exactly. You're a threat to them, aren't you? Because you're speaking up, you're exposing.
No, I kind of, there's a number of emotions. One, you think, well, why? I mean, people call me brave. Why am I being brave? I'm only telling you what's happened over the last 18
years. Yeah.
I've got no reason to lie. Why should I be scared about being honest? Nobody said to me, don't be fucking honest or we'll kill you.
Yeah.
I thought you probably would have thought twice about it. Do you know? But you know, I haven't done anything wrong. I've just recounted my experience as a funeral director over the last 18 months, and it's been a case of joining dots. I'm pretty confident. I know what's happening. Would I love to be wrong? Of course I would. Do I want to be?
But you're not, though.
Yeah.
I have.
No.
Kids are going to die shortly, and I know they're going to call it a new variant, and we've got to protect the kids. My worry is they'll perhaps mandate on the back of that, and then the manhunt and the bloodbath will begin, won't we? Because there's no way on earth I would ever willingly take it. So I would suggest that they'll probably hunt me down, and I'll end up in one of the internment camps that they've built, where I'll swiftly be killed and then labelled as a COVID death.
Yeah,
we're all heading that way. All us people that know
we take our futures into our own hands, and you can interpret that any way you want.
So there's a question. I'm not sure how you'll be able to answer that, but someone says, what do you think of the possible introduction of a new higher frequency? Do you know anything about this affecting people's health?
I've heard, I'm not a scientist. I have a fair background in engineering and computing and Wi-Fi and networks. I've heard and seen testimony to the large amount of graphene content in some of these injections and the magnetic qualities that they possess. You know, you don't have to look very hard to see people sticking rulers and scissors, coins.
Yeah, they're becoming magnetic, aren't they?
And I would suggest you'd have to be an idiot to not see the connection with low frequency influencing a body full of graphene to create blood clots. And lo and behold, people are dying left, right, and centre from blood clots. I spoke to a nurse only yesterday who called me and said that her friend in another hospital told her they've got currently 12 patients with blood clots in their arms, something that never seen before pre-COVID. So pretty obvious what's happening, isn't it? I think what's put a fly in their ointment is they didn't expect the number of deaths before they've done whatever they needed to do. Early deaths, you know, early adverse reactions. It's kind of put a fly in the ointment because a lot of people like myself and the NHS have put 2 and 2 together.
See, the thing I get a lot of when you speak to people is people that say, you know, say for instance, we had someone at the gym who's healthy. He believes in COVID because he said he's never been this ill. Now, he's never had a jab. He's never had, you know, any vaccine or anything. So there are people that are becoming ill that have.
And as I've said to you,
it's not just. He spent 18 months wearing a mask.
Well, it's possible. Who knows?
He was wearing a mask when he was talking to them.
Think about it. If you're trying to convince people they're ill, I don't doubt there are viruses and pathogens out there, maybe some that have been deliberately released. There was talk of the Wuhan lab.
But there's no disputing, John, that the masks do compromise the immune system.
Of course, you'll get bacterial pneumonia.
You know, and 18 months of wearing a mask is not going to do your immune system any good, is it?
No.
And every year there is a virus out there. So is there a virus? Of course there is. Is it what it's being made out to be? I don't know. I've addressed 100 of them. You tell me.
I think it's the mainstream media. That's the virus, isn't it?
The media is the virus. And the mainstream media are all controlled by the same people in the big pharmaceuticals and government. So they're all intertwined, aren't they? Do you know?
The thing is, it could be shedding from the vaccine. People don't believe in shedding. There are people that say it's not true.
There's a number of things, isn't there? I think if you have a virus, it's you know, you can be contagious. But people said to me, well, if it's a cold, why don't they just release the pathogen that kills everyone? Because they put themselves at risk then.
Yeah,
exactly.
They potentially kill themselves. So the best way to do it is tell everyone they're sick, create the hysteria, and then
stick a needle in.
I'm a lifesaver. Is there shedding? I really don't know enough about it to know. But if it's probably catchable.
It's the way I see it is whatever's been injected to people inside people is not natural. So what that will then produce something unnatural that is from the body.
And I kind of, for a deeper explanation, I would point people towards the experts in the field who have spoken out and totally opposed it and totally and utterly condemned it. And they've gone into the biological science behind that thinking, haven't they, in their field of expertise? But they're totally discounted and ignored. And you know, I don't know what to tell you, but I know what's going on. I know what's going on, and I suspect it won't be very long, and I probably won't be about much longer either.
Well, we're going to pray for you, and you know, I think you're here for a reason. I do think you'll be here for a long time because there's obviously a higher plan for you because
You know, for me, it is. I'm 53. I've had a really good life. I've got a lovely family. I've got my own son. I've had love. I've got lots of really good friends, and I've done something in my life that I never thought I would do. You know, I've made a real difference and took care of people when they're at their lowest ebb, and I really, you know, you get an insight into their whole lives, and you help them through that, and it's been a privilege to do that. But at the moment, I'm tortured because it feels like I'm complicit in covering up murders. People I know that have been killed by the state, and we're carrying out their funerals. And you know, it makes me want to scream from the rooftops, this is murder. But I can't do that, you know. All I can do is kind of talk to people and warn them, tell them about my experience, and then let them make their own mind up. And if
I think that's what you can do. I'm in the same boat in school. That I want to scream at parents, but unfortunately, you can only talk to them.
Well, we're all slaves to the moneylender. You know, we've had 5 or 6 years now of virtually 0% interest rate, haven't we? So it's encouraged everyone to get cheap debt, and we're all slaves to the moneylender, aren't we? So it's great leverage, the threat of losing your job or your business, and it's worked really well. The amount of people that I've spoke to who didn't actually want it but had to have it because they were blackmailed. You know, Google blackmail now. It's a crime in law. And yet these are victims of crime. They're coerced, blackmail, bribery, you know, an Uber cab, a kebab for a jab, Sadiq Khan giving out Euro tickets. Do you know, oh, do you know what? It was, I'm not really a mad football fan, but I watched this Euros and I just felt pain in my heart because I see all these Englishmen standing up, cheering and roaring with such passion for 24 virtue signalling multimillionaires kicking a bit.
Don't get me started, John.
Yeah, their freedoms, and they're lining up to kill their kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's where's that passion now? They're going to kill your kids. Sterilize your kids. Show me the passion. Show me the same passion you had for 24 multimillionaires virtue signaling, kicking a bit of leather. Because I don't see it. And trust me, they'll have to fight tooth and nail to get that crap in my child. I can tell you.
Yeah, it's shocking, isn't it?
It's really sad, and I have to keep reminding myself. You know, I don't want to resent them because they're victims of a lie. Because I'm sure if they knew what I knew, they'd be horrified. they'd be horrified. So I have to keep, you know, kind of reminding myself they are victims as well. And as they get sick and they die, they're going to need every one of us to help them and to counsel, comfort them in their deaths, and they will die. I'm convinced.
There's been jobs advertised for people to be with vans to collect body bags.
Yeah, it's actually the government are calling for people to assist the collection of dead bodies.
Is that true? Like,
I don't doubt that, to be honest with you. What I have seen is tenders for huge temporary mortuaries up and down the country, and those are one-off contracts, and they're to run till 2025, 2026. The way it works with a public tender is they have to put it out to tender, and then you'll find that a company who is successful, there's usually some ministerial interest there at some level. You know, it is what it is, isn't it? I suppose I've grown used to this level of corruption now. You know, we're just as bad, probably worse than some of these African governments. They're all too quick to criticise these African governments, saying how corrupt they are. We're every bit as bad and worse than I think some of the most honourable men are African. Do you know?
Yes.
And they're called dead.
And they killed
all the prime ministers that spoke out through this pandemic. They've all been suicide, didn't they?
Died in the last 18 months.
I
can tell you why. Because they wouldn't accept killing their people. So they're every bit. You know, if Boris Johnson had suddenly died and we could reflect and say, no, he wouldn't kill us, his legacy could be honesty and honour, and he could have died for real purpose. He could have remembered as a hero, and 65 million people would have been behind him.
He will die with purpose because he's a eugenicist.
Yeah, he's a genocidal maniac.
Of course he is, so he will die with purpose. He's doing exactly what he's setting out to do.
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it?
You have to applaud the sick fuck. Excuse my French.
Yeah, and all these people in these internment camps will pass that story down to our kids and their kids if we're ever lucky. He'll go down in history as Boris the Slayer. He's a monster. He knows he is. Come and arrest me.
I think you're doing an amazing job, and the comments we're getting here, you know, everybody is absolutely praising you. You really are.
Them to reach out if they want to talk to me. You know, my details are there. It's www.mkffs.co.uk. Feel free to give me a call. You know,
this is a genuine man. You know, a light in this world of darkness right now, because the way we see it every day, we are living on hell. This is
we're on hell's plane.
Yeah, definitely.
I would ask all these people that know what's going on, how long do you honestly think that you've got before they come for you? Will it be years, 3 years? 3 years is 150 weeks. Are you prepared to say nothing in the hope of living 150 weeks? Then you place no value on life or the life of anyone else.
Absolutely not, no.
No, I would be bought, and I would rather speak out now than try and speak out from an internment camp. And for all those saying, oh, they'd never do it, they'd never do it, they are going to do it. They are going to do it.
They're doing it.
Yeah, they're doing it. They've built them. They've built them. Take a look at HMP Wellingborough. It's there. The crematorium is next door, and there's a mortuary next door to that. That since I've podcast and talked about, they're tearing it down now. Do you know? So I know they know. Do you know? They know what they're doing. They know that what I've said is right, and that is why the BBC they clamoured to see me to get the footage they needed to promote the hysteria. The silence is deafening now. No one from the BBC wants to talk to me now, and I've reached out to them.
Yeah.
They don't know now. You know, if I was in charge in this deadliest pandemic, and I was a leader and I was an MP, and I heard a funeral director saying what I've said, I'd be clamouring to speak to them to find out what was going on. Why have you got these concerns? What mistakes do you feel we're making? Do you know? They're not even hiding that. They just don't want to talk.
No. So,
what point? The trouble is society, and we're all guilty of it. We've got used to our comfy duvet and our iPad and big flat screen TV, you know, and Facebook, and spending hours glued to that instead of going and knocking on people's doors and spending time with them. Do you know? You need to wake up and smell the coffee, because pretty soon life for you as you know it, it's never going back to what it was.
No, absolutely not.
And
what would you advise people do?
I would advise them to prepare for the civil unrest like of you've never seen, because I can tell you, people don't love anything more than they love their kids. So when they start killing children and they call it a new variant, there'll be a large percentage of people that simply won't buy that, and they will fight to the death for their kids.
Well, they're all trying to spin it, won't they? They'll say that the reason the children are dying is not because of the vaccine, it's because of the unvaccinated, you know, the selfish people like ourselves.
But these kids will all have one thing in common. They'll have all had that injection. And they might say...
We've all got one thing in common, John. None of us have got the virus.
No, exactly
So
that.
how the fuck are we spreading it?
I'm dealing with it on a everyday basis now. Interestingly, the COVID numbers at the moment are not great. They're not anything like they have been labelled by us. They're getting the odd one or two, but it's the sudden deaths in the youngsters. You know, 40-year-olds, 30-year-olds, heart attack. That's.
Can I just ask as well, John? Have you experienced many suicides with the younger people?
Yeah, suicide rates gone through the roof. Yeah,
that's another thing I don't want to talk about, isn't it?
But let's face it. When you look around, when you think about, I mean, the weight that I bear personally, it's horrendous. It's horrible to think about, isn't it? I'm quite a well-balanced, happy-go-lucky guy. I feel under duress, so I can only imagine if you're susceptible to mental illness, it's going to overwhelm you, isn't it? And you're going to take your own life. You see what's going on. And I went down to the local hospital, as I do regularly, and was told firsthand by the mortuary manager down there, suicides have gone through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
But that all part of the agenda as well. That suits them nicely. It's one less they ain't got to waste an injection on, isn't it? In their minds, you know, in these sick, twisted minds. I know what's going on. I know nothing would ever dissuade me. They can put me in an internment camp and line me up in a classroom forever. I will never, ever not see what I've seen, and I'll take it to the grave. So they better swiftly dispatch me.
Are there other undertakers supporting you?
Yeah. I've got a network of undertakers that have reached out to me, who are all terrified. They're terrified, you know, in the same way as me. I'm very frightened, you know. Am I ready to die? Not really. I don't want to. You know, I just want.
You are all the main witnesses to the genocide that's going on right now.
Of course. So ultimately, they're going to target us. What can I say? But you know, there are NHS workers are also there, and they see what's gone on. They see the medical history as well, and they speak to the families, and they know what's gone on. They know. The threat of them.
Like you said earlier, now they're getting forced to take this poison.
Well,
a lot of them leave, and once they leave, they have to whistle blow. They have to come out and speak out.
Oh, they've got nothing to lose if they've already lost everything. What they've got to lose, you know. So I kind of hope that that's what they'll do, and they'll use various platforms to do that, and people will see it. But do you know, people that are heavily invested in this? I've got a couple of really good friends who are double jab recipients, people that I knew really well, and I've lost them.
I know that feeling. We know that feeling as well. It's so sad that.
Yeah, they totally been. My own brother, he totally believes it. You know, he had COVID early on, or he had winter flu. Basically, it was early COVID days, and he went out to a lap dancing club with a load of lads on a stag do, and 3 or 4 of them ended up with real bad flu kind of thing. They all took this crappy PCR test and tested positive, so they're convinced they had it. They've called him back in to take some blood to see if he had antibody resistant, or, you know, I suspect probably to tailor the new jabs to make them more effective. Yeah. You know, it is what it is, isn't it? Yeah. But he's convinced. And as a result, we fell out. You know, he cursed my mum into getting one, and accused me of trying to kill her by trying to persuade her not to have one. You know, what can you say? It's torn families apart up and down the country.
Friends, it's torn friends and family.
Yeah, but isn't that a really valid strategy, divide and conquer?
Yeah, works, doesn't it?
No,
it's so sad.
I kind of don't pass judgment on him. He believes it, and I see him as a victim of the lie. So when, God forbid, but if I get the call to say he's dying or he's unwell, I'll have to reach out to him and try and offer him some comfort. It's horrible because I'm kind of waiting for a phone call to see who in my family is going to die first. It's a horrible feeling.
But we've got friends who have had this jab, and literally friends and friends of friends, and, you know, one had a heart attack within 48 hours. Another friend of mine, her husband is suffering so bad with his arthritis like he'd never suffered before.
Yeah, two managers in my firm died, didn't they?
Yeah.
One
so
within 48 hours and one within a week.
We know of people, not just what the media, you know, is not telling. We actually know of people that are actually suffering from this.
Yeah, I've had loads of 1 in a millions in here. You know, clients, they do open up to you when you do this kind of job. You get quite close, and I'm in touch with them from the point of the first phone call all the way through. You know, I'm just had a notification, and you get quite close, quite quick. And I've had so many 1 in a millions in here. You wouldn't believe it. You know, I should almost go and buy a lottery ticket. It's and the blindness was one. The guy, his mum had the jab, and she went almost instantly. Paralysis from the waist down, paralysis on one side of the face that they've swiftly been labelled with Bell's palsy. I mean, Bell's, come on. You know, where are you, doctors? Where's your honour? Where is your honour? You know, you're all going to be nailed soon anyway. Just go out with some honour, you know, and then perhaps we might have a chance together. But the way they're chipping away at things, you know, there's going to be less and less and less of us. And I suggest, you know, perhaps we'll end our days running through a wood somewhere.
You know something, I'd rather go as a natural organic being than to be, you know, dying a slow death.
Yeah, I've committed time. All I've done is be honest. I'd rather die an honest man than I would injected with God knows what and labelled as a COVID death or a heart condition.
I think it's safe to say, John, I think we're all a bunch of William Wallaces, aren't we?
You know, it's one thing to talk about it, and I've noticed there's a lot of people that talk the talk, but when it comes to taking the call and talking openly and saying, yeah, identify me, and saying, yeah, you know, this is me, there's not many people want to do that. You know, it's the next step, isn't it? Go and do it. Go and do it now, because you're talking about your lives and the lives of your. If you don't love your kids, ignore it and hope it'll go away. But and I can tell you, they will inject kids. Kids will die, and the government should maybe use me as a consultant, because I've got amazing foresight. I can tell them what's going on.
We need you to do our lottery numbers that we don't ever do, because I don't believe in the lottery either.
No.
Can we pick up again maybe in a few months' time to see what you know?
You can, of course. You
well,
can.
You're still going to be here because
just to make sure you haven't been suicided, John.
Someone,
I'm very healthy. Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah. Well, your journey's not over.
Can you just clarify while you're on a live? You do not have any suicidal tendencies.
Yeah.
None at all.
Only suicidal tendencies for government. But what I would say to you is if I was suddenly to drop down dead, or they would close me down, do you think that would add credibility to my story, or would it totally discredit me as a conspiracy theorist?
Well, they're doing everything to put us down as conspiracy theorists, everything to discredit us. You know, and this is the problem. Even within the movement or so-called truth movement, there's infiltrators to discredit real people. So this will always be fighting this.
Isn't that? It's a strategy, isn't it?
It is.
It works both ways, and I would like to think that somewhere out there are people with truth and honour that are fighting tooth and nail for me and you. Do you know?
I believe that.
I can tell you, I've took messages and I've had deep conversations with a number of police officers, and there's a growing dissent within the force outside London. And I spoke to police officers in London, and there's a growing dissent there as well. And because they know, and ultimately their children will be targeted as well. And we all love our children. We won't allow that to happen. So you
can tell your police officers that they can change sides. And there is a group called the Guardian 300. I've
been speaking to members of that group 2 hours ago.
Fantastic.
You're speaking to members right now.
Yeah, we joined up because we want to do something to help businesses and people. That's the only thing we can do, because I believe we are past this stage of trying to wake people up.
These people are fully invested in killing us, and they've been doing so since January locally. They've been killing people. And then last year it was midazolam. This year it's a vaccine. Do you know? I know what's going on because I'm on the coalface. I know what's going on. I've spoke to the nurses, I've spoke to the care workers, I've spoke to the doctors. They've all confided in me in floods of tears, because they see me now as someone to reach out to. I don't know why, but I've had first-hand personal testimony from them. I've spoke to police officers, I've spoke to professors, a virologist, and dozens more people than I can count. I spend as much time now talking to people about this debacle, this democide, this genocide, as I do doing my own business, and I'm trying to be a dad at the same time. So it is really tough. It is really tough. But do you know what? I know why I'm here now. We're all born, aren't we? And we wonder why we're born. Yeah. We all ask ourselves that question. I know why I'm here now, and I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I dare them to come and get me.
John, as far as I'm concerned, you have the armor of God protecting you. Someone up there needs you here to do the job you're doing. You're doing an amazing job. I want to thank you for giving me the time to share your story. I hope everyone watching this, please share this live so more people can hear what, someone literally on the front line. You're not going to get as good as this, the real front line. Please share this live.
Well, you have to bear in mind now, it's in my interest as well, because the more people that are aware of what I've said, it helps protect me and my family, because I don't doubt they're chewing over what they can do to nail me, and I don't care about me. I've had most of my life. I do worry for my family, though, and the impact on them. So people that know, again, would it add credibility to my story if I died suddenly, or would it discredit me? And I would suggest to you it would tell people exactly what I'm saying is exactly true. And that's why I've got 85,000 to stay silent.
Well, you have to ask the question. Kerry Mullis, the creator of the PCR test, died 2 months before the pandemic started.
Yes.
They didn't want him talking. No. Most of the president of Tanzania died. He did not want to have anything to do with this new world order. There's a number of other presidents that have been killed. People that
12 in total or something.
Yeah,
So I did check them through. It is legitimate. They have all passed away, but it's not national news, is it? And no. The fact checkers there are people like Reuters that are all owned by the Rothschilds. It's unbelievable.
Well, that's the thing. These presidents did generally be. They did die, unlike Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
But he made the news, didn't he?
Yeah. Exactly. It's and I would say while I'm here as well, I'm getting a lot of requests on Facebook and Messenger. They've banned my account on Facebook for 30 days. And they've also unusually stopped me from talking to anyone via Messenger. So please, for anyone who friend requests me on Facebook that I accept, I can't talk to you. I really want to, and it's so frustrating. So you can see the details of my funeral home.
All part of being a truther, John, is not being allowed to speak. And if you do speak, no one's listening.
Well, John, we're always here to spread your word. Honestly, you've got my number. Always get in touch, and we will hopefully pick up again in a few months to see what happens.
You know where I am if you need me. You've only got to reach out.
Literally, from all of us here watching.
I can't thank you enough, John. Thanks very much for your time.
No, more than welcome. And
time, your honesty and your truth.
Yeah.
Do you know what? All we've got is each other.
That's it.
It is.
Sadly, that is very true.
Family's every bit as important as mine.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we do this for everyone. We don't just do it for us. We do it for everyone. I look at children that I don't even know. I'll do it for them, even if their parents are not aware. I do it for them.
I turned down 85 grand this weekend.
There you go. This is the problem. When people have signed that contract with the devil, when they've taken that jab for materialism, for travel, for football, for nightclubs, for pubs. Well, this is.
It's interesting the mindset of actually they know the future is the kids. And that is a really important thing for them to get now. When we was kids, and you'll remember that far back, I don't doubt, you lived for the weekends. You lived for your life. So to take that away from a kid, going to go and line up for a jab. Do you know? No. They're coerced and blackmailed into doing it, aren't they? These greedy, disgusting, repulsive old men should be ashamed of themselves. And do you know what? I draw comfort from thinking if there is a God of some description and there is judgment, when these bastards breathe their last, they're going to be breathing their last, terrified.
I'd like to think that.
You know the scariest reality I'm seeing in this as well, John, the fact that they're saying that 12-year-olds can now go against the consent of their parents.
Grooming.
To take an unlicensed, well, it's not a vaccine, it's a poison, with no public liability to it. Well, if a 12-year-old can go against a parent's decision on this vaccine, what's stopping a 12-year-old walking through the door with a 30-year-old man or woman and saying, well, I want to date them, mum, there's nothing you can say about it. Can you see where this is going? They're
not old enough to drink. They're not old enough to vote. They're not old enough to work. They're not old enough to do anything, but they're old enough to make a life or death decision. It is going only one way, and it's pandering to these paedophile, corrupt, evil.
This is exactly what I'm saying, John. This is definitely opening a door for paedophilia.
Yeah, it's obvious. You know, want to have sex with a 12-year-old? Start by telling them they can make up their own mind as regards.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty slow, isn't it? How much do you love your kids, people?
Exactly. We've just been asked, what's the name of your funeral parlour?
So it's Milton Keynes Family Funeral Services, and we're based in Milton Keynes. If you do a search for funeral directors in Milton Keynes, you'll see me there. You'll see me there. I've had quite a few Google reviews, so I think about 150 odd. So you know, we're nearly top of the list, I believe. We've had a few trolls go on there and leave shitty reviews, but I kind of expected that. Yeah,
you're gonna, John, keep standing in your truth. You're an amazing man. And thank you for your time. Really do appreciate this.
Bye, everyone.
Massive respect, John. Thank you very much.
Bye now.